All right, hello everyone. I hope you are enjoying day 2 of Ohio VC Fest, continuing to make connections and networking. And right now we are going to get to our next panel presentation. Let's give a big round of applause for all of our leaders that we have here on the stage. This one is all about leveraging corporate connections and the key to scaling startups. So they will be discussing all the resources and networks of established corporations and give their insight of their personal experience. And there's no better person to moderate this panel than the CEO of the City Club of Cleveland, Dan Moulthrop. He will lead the discussion today. He is a nationally recognized moderator and civic leader with a media, education, and public policy background. He has a gift for leading critical conversations and connecting diverse perspectives to foster impactful dialogue. So please help me welcome to the stage Dan, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's a little warm in here. If you're dressed formally, feel free to take your jacket off. My name is Dan Moulthrop. I am the CEO of the City Club of Cleveland. I'm going to briefly tell you who's on the stage, and we're going to get started. I'm not going to do a whole lot of biographical stuff because you all at some point will be like, who is that person? You won't even be listening. And then you'll be like, who is that person who's talking right now? And then you'll look them up on LinkedIn, and then you'll send that connection request. And so anyway, the energy in here is really low. I just want to encourage you guys to just take a few deep breaths and like get into it. So next to me is John Briggs. John is head of commercial product and EVP at KeyBank. So he walked across the street. We're really glad you could make it. Thank you.
Tough commute.
Yeah. And then next to him from Lubrizol, Vice President of Innovation, Decision Science and Technology is Abhishek Srivastava. And I probably mispronounced that. We went over it several times. I did good? Okay, right. Great. Karim Botros, who used to be a Jumpstart and is now managing partner at EcoHealth Ventures. And then Carey Jaros, who just revealed that this whole panel was her idea. So I'm going to start off by asking, what was your idea? Like, why this panel?
First of all, it looks like someone was chewing on this microphone. It was not me, so I do not expect to get a bill in the mail.
It's actually, Carey gets really mad. She hit somebody with it.
Yeah. So much fun to be here. What a fun panel. Glad Dan's here. So this was my idea because I got into doing a bunch of work on the side with startups sort of by accident. My husband and I started doing some angel investing, and then pretty quickly I ended up with a sort of a flock of startup CEOs who I was talking to on a very regular basis when I was driving places, mostly. And they became friends and mentees sort of, but really mostly two-way mentoring. And we just fell in love with sort of helping startups be startups. One of the things I learned really early is that the initial conversation I had with a lot of those founders was like, give me money. That might be familiar. I don't know if you guys have ever asked somebody to give you money. I don't know if you watched Parks and Rec. That's one of my favorite parts of Parks and Rec when the daughter says, give me money. So I felt like a lot of the conversations started there. And as we spent more time together, we both found out that there were actually way more ways that I could be helpful to these startup CEOs than giving them money. I also usually gave them a little bit of money and felt like part of the process and cared about their businesses. But that was like the very beginning. And I felt like there were things that I had to offer, not just personally and through my personal network, but also some things I had to offer as the leader of a big organization that ended up being extremely valuable. And so I thought we could talk about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Abhishek, I want to start with you and sort of how you work with startups at Lubrizol. Give us a sense of kind of when you have, what's the kind of problem that you can't solve internally that you start to look for an outside partner for?
Yeah, I think, startups, number one, like you said, the energy is a little bit low, but overall, startups are about energy, optimism, right? And speed, right? So that's something big corporations always want. We want optimism because we always look at things and say, okay, why would this not work? That's our first question, right? Because we've got a big core to protect. Because, especially for me, working in specialty chemicals, we are in the middle part of the value chain where we take a lot of feedstocks and we enable products, and then customers use the products and make millions and billions of dollars. So any change we make, we have to be really careful that how is it going to impact the value chain, especially our customers. So we are risk averse. And we are structured, that's why, because you need that. But for startups, what we miss is that optimism, like I talked about, and the speed, right? the lack of structure, we like that because we can't incubate that even as a skunk works in a big organization. So we have various ways of incubating new technologies, go to adjacencies, but when it's outside the core, when we know this market is getting disrupted, our core business is getting disrupted, we want to get access to those startups. We want to get access to those speed. And also the reward structure is different for startups, right? It's huge. It's high risk, high reward. And that's what we miss, and that's where it's an ideal partnership as we look at new domains.
Great, thank you. Karim, Echo Health Ventures, when you are looking, you're evaluating startups all the time and connecting them with potential corporate partners as well. So talk about how that works for you, and even better if you can do it with a story about a startup that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because when we think about startups, a lot of times our fund is backed by 4 large blues. So their version of a startup might be a little bit more graduated than a seed or a Series A. When we think of a great sort of example of that is we have a couple companies that have approached us, and they have a product that might hit 5 or 6 different lines of business within a blue. It is
a blue is like Blue Cross?
A Blue Cross Blue Shield,
Thank
like
you.
an MMO, like a large payer. And if you know anything about selling into a payer, selling into one line of business is hard enough. Selling into 5 is like you're going to step on someone's real estate. It's not going to really work. So one of the advice that we share often with our prospective companies is just have focus. Find one line of business. Find an executive that has some sort of bonus, incentive, strategic objective that lines up with your company, and focus in that area. Land and expand later, but really get that traction. And I'd say some of the companies that have done a really good job in our portfolio on that have executed on that in a really decent way. And then we're able to expand quite effectively.
Tell us one story about one specific company, and I invite you to name it.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give a great company. We have a company called Medics, which is an infusion business, so not a sexy business in any way. They thought that their product could hit into value-based care infusion as well as into just clinical services. They interrupted 2 different groups within the payer group. There's a group that manages value, and there's a group that manages contracts with providers. These guys were able to get traction, open up 5 or 6 offices in Oregon, and really grow pretty effectively, and have held off efficiently on not introducing value-based care until they get more traction across the organization. It's probably, well, it's now a $300 million business, so it's growing really well.
Is that they held off on pushing on value-based care because you kept telling them to hold off?
Just stay focused. You're getting traction, you're growing, keep that and let it go. And then as they sort of get to the next level of which executive is the right champion, then let's take that to the next level. But first, just take your traction and go with it.
You know, fintech isn't as sexy as infusion, John, but I wonder if you could tell us a story about one of the startups you're working with and how that's sort of exemplary of how how KeyBank is working with startups.
Absolutely, and I tend to disagree. I think fintech is very sexy. I have no idea what Karim is talking about in terms of infusions. So maybe it's capital. I get that. So for us, we've been in the game of partnering with, investing in startups for, it's going on 10 years now, and it's core to what we do at the bank, core to our strategy. It's out of necessity for us, and we think we bring a lot of value to the startup as well. We can't be everything to everybody, so we believe that in the notion of targeted scale. So we're going to pick our spots. We're going to double, triple down in that space. And what the startup community allows us to do is be hyper-focused in areas in ways we cannot. And so they can materially advance our roadmap. I think what we have found, one of our biggest, and Karim is hitting on this, as a strategic and an ecosystem participant, oftentimes, like what Karim is just hitting on is decision-making authority within an organization. Banks, we oftentimes have unique relationships with clients and can help startups, cut through the tape, navigate that environment, and frankly make their batting average when they're going in and pitching alongside us, far better than it would be alone. And you also have obviously the scale of a bank standing behind you, which helps as well.
So you didn't mention anything specific there. So
Yeah.
I just want to just tell a story about a startup you're working with.
Yeah, one we actually just announced earlier this week, a company called Zentist. So they are, it's a phenomenal company.
Sorry, I don't understand.
I'll explain in a minute. They are where they fit into the value chain. They're a dental claims automation platform for dental offices, DSOs. So bringing a lot of efficiency and increased revenue to dental offices, which are, at the end of the day, they're small businesses that don't have a lot of time on their hands. And so any way that you can automate and drive efficiencies in their back offices is great for them. And so we've partnered with them. It's mutually beneficial, and this is part of the advantage of working with strategic. There's things we obviously can't do. Their technology and all the AI that they've injected into the process to drive a lot of the automation. There's also things they can't do. So we have massive scale. We have the ability to handle lots of payment volume, lots of check processing. And when you bring those things together, we can holistically solve some really big pain points for a dental service organization. And it becomes a win-win, for obviously for, I guess, a win-win-win, a win for Zentist, a win for KeyBank, because we have something that's far more compelling than any of our competitors. And we're solving the biggest problem for our DSOs from a financial perspective.
How many DSOs were you banking before, and how many are you banking? How many more do you expect to bank?
So we don't, off the top of my head, the actual number that we bank today. There's 2,500 DSOs in the country today, rapidly, rolling up the dental space. So if you're going to be in the dental space, you really got to be able to serve DSOs. What you're hitting on is it's exactly how we think of this, as it becomes a phenomenally differentiated value prop in the space, which can help propel our growth in the space. So it's, yes, we're going to deepen relationships with some of the largest DSOs that we already serve in the country today, but really what we're interested in is continuing to drive client growth through this capability and new avenue.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carey, Jaros, you are an investor in Claire Coder's company, Antflow. And talk about what you like. I know that's a story you're eager to tell, and talk about that organization, please.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite startups. So raise your hand if you've heard of Antflow. Some people. Okay, she's gotten a lot of press. She's done a really, really good job getting the word out.
I really thought you were going to say raise your hand if you've menstruated.
I mean, I could guess. Yeah, let's go team. Okay, so Claire Coder's amazing. She dropped out of college because she had this idea that a company that provided free, safe menstrual products could make money. It was a crazy notion at the time, but she believed in it, like many entrepreneurs feel about their businesses. She totally believed in it. And she thought the way that would happen is by getting people who need period products to tell the facilities that they visit every day that this is something that should be provided just like toilet paper and Kleenex and paper towels and other things that are there. And she decided she was going to create demand and then fulfill supply, which is it's a brave model because it's two steps, right? The demand's not there to begin with. You have to sort of get people clamoring for what you want to deliver and then deliver it. So she dropped out of college quite a while ago now and started this business. And I met her when she was a Thiel Fellow and starting to attract some pretty significant investment. So she had already been, she had gotten through sort of the first stage of all the death threats that entrepreneurs face. And when I met her, she was trying to figure out, she had secured some really big wins with some large corporate campuses. So places like Apple and Microsoft had put her products in. She had like little boxes. She had set up manufacturing in Asia. So she had done a bunch of really important work. But what she was bumping up against in our industry, I come from the soap and sanitizer side, What she was bumping up against in our industry is that buildings actually aren't serviced the way that she was selling. So she wanted to get a bunch of college students mad that there were no free tampons, have them send emails to facilities, and then she wanted to go to facilities and say, I have the free tampons, they're not free for you. You will pay for them, but then you can provide them and this whole thing's gonna work. Facilities, when they were getting sort of barraged with these emails, was sort of sometimes converting with her plan at the beginning. But within a couple of months, they were saying, hey, I don't want a box coming from Aunt Flo that I have to order every month. Like, this does not work with the way that I buy products for my restrooms or manage my large campus. And so she naturally said, well, how do you do that? And they said, we have some combination of a building service contractor, a property manager, a distributor who comes in. We have all these methods that we use to service our buildings. And they said, so which one of those can you plug into? And she was like, oh, none of them. I haven't thought about that. And so we got connected because we sell PURELL and lots of soap through all those channels that I just described really effectively. And we're in Ohio, and she was in Ohio, and I'm a woman CEO, a bunch of reasons why people sort of sent her to me. But pretty immediately, I started asking her questions, and it was clear that this was going to be a real hurdle for her, that she was going to have to figure out how to actually play in some of the more traditional channels if she wanted to be successful. And so I brought Claire in. We spent a bunch of time educating her with my team on how this worked. I did that because I thought it was the right thing to do, because she was a young entrepreneur who was trying to do something good in the world. I did it because she clearly had an insane amount of hustle, deeply believed in what she was doing, and I know she's going to be successful in this life. And I think when you help people early who are going to be successful, it's only good for both the world and for you. And I did it because I know that in my business, I have a ton of people who would love to work in startups, but frankly, for a bunch of reasons in their lives, they're choosing to be at GOJO, but that itch is still there, and they love helping entrepreneurs, especially people like Claire. So I knew by bringing her in and letting my team help her, that it would give them energy, they would be reaffirmed in all the things they're really good at and the reasons why GOJO is a great company, and also they'd have shared success with her as she went off. So we did that. We spent a bunch of time together. We came up with some creative ways for her to start to play in those more traditional channels. Claire being who she is, she then moved on, and based on the initial introductions I made, she started using my team all the time, right, without me knowing. So I would get emails every once in a while that said, oh, Claire was here yesterday. We were showing her how to make a dispenser. She's so great. And I'm thinking, I didn't offer that. I offered one meeting to teach you about these, paths to market. She talked to some of our suppliers to figure out what material to use for her dispensers. We had 78 years of experience making soap dispensers that stay on the wall, and she was gonna launch her first dispenser ever. And we had so much to tell her so that she could avoid the 78 years of painful learnings, right, and get it right the first time. Claire ended up becoming a woman-owned business early in her process. We decided later to become a certified woman-owned business, and she helped us with that process. So it's been an incredibly gratifying two-way relationship. She's continued to be more and more successful. One of the side benefits is she competes with all of my big competitors. And so I love seeing her be successful and kick their teeth in, which is just like a really nice side benefit. So I would say one of the things to look for if you're a startup is like, with whom do I have shared enemies in addition to having opportunity? Because those are the very best partners. Yeah.
Just to clarify, Carey, did GOJO invest capital?
No.
Just you personally?
Yeah, actually, Claire, that's one of the few startups that I'm involved in where she has never actually asked me for money.
Oh.
I am an advisor, and she's raised a bunch of money on her own. I would invest in her if she needed money, but I've given her more time and resources. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's perfect. So I want to open up that question. One of the things I heard in the story, particularly in your in how you ended the story, is that working with Claire was a real cultural fit. She's the kind of person you would hire. You would want her on your team. How do you assess for that, all of you? And Abhishek, let's start with you. When you're evaluating a startup founder who's sitting in front of you.
I think one thing is, like you said, cultural fit is important, and understanding that we're in it together, right? One thing is the speed, it has to fit, number one, with the strategy of the company and the investment thesis, right? Number one. Two is like, I feel when the startup is successful, if you get an impression that they're not thinking of a win-win situation, because we met with a company recently where they didn't need the money, right? They just needed our help in getting that product to the market. And to me, the big thing was that they had a very early stage product where we needed a lot of scale up, a lot of work from our side, but the appreciation was not there. And it was like we're just shopping around for partners who can just help us get our product to the market, because investors need that to increase the valuation. So again, part of one team, and we are working for a win-win situation. That's number one. And Lubrizol's culture is also, we value collaboration and teamwork versus brilliance, right? Because there are a lot of areas where we look at vectors, right? All of us in a team are vectors. So if you're not in the same direction, you can be strong vectors, you'll cancel each other out, right? So that's one thing we look at. So you could be a small vector, but if you have a mindset of collaboration and adding up with the rest of the team, as a team, you'll be much bigger as compared to a bunch of strong people, bunch of alphas, or whatever you want to call them, trying to just append each other and cancel each other. So that's what we look for startups, right? It's not really the brilliance, but the collaboration and the long haul and the win-win.
John?
Yeah, some of the things. So we've, given our history in this space, we've certainly made some mistakes and learned
Tell us the story of a mistake.
I won't name a specific name, but I would, one of the things we learned early is you can get enamored with the mousetrap or the thing or the product, and a team can have the best product in a category or in a space, and it's the absolute best thing for our clients. But if you don't have that cultural alignment with the management team, it's just not going to work. It'll completely erode the joint success. And so some of the things we try to look for in terms of signals is, one, who are they connected into in the ecosystem? Fintech and the tech space, it's a relatively small universe, and so you can start to get a sense of the people that they're connected to, associated with as a signal. We're a highly regulated industry, and as such, we ask our partners, our clients expect whatever we're delivering to them to be bank grade, which means we're putting these companies through some pretty stringent processes to make sure that they check all the boxes from a risk perspective. You can hear signals as companies are going through that in terms of how much they understand the importance of being a prudently run institution, and that's another signal if there's resistance to it.
The sort of move fast, break things model doesn't really work for you?
It doesn't, and it's a delicate balance. Like we like to say, don't crush the butterfly, but don't trip the elephant, which is we want to try to preserve what we love about these companies, which is how nimble they are, how innovative they are, but at the same time, we've got a 200-year-old financial institution that needs to continue to be well managed, well run, and we can't have this fintech trip it up. And so it's a fine line you walk as you're trying to build culture between the teams and build something together.
Karim, you talked before about advising portfolio companies in going slow, essentially. How else do you talk to the founders and their sales folks about the importance of culture and cultural fit when courting a corporate partner?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really interesting program for our portfolio companies. So over the course of a year, we have one event called a collision, right? Where we take the CEOs of all of our portfolio companies and then match them up with the executives of our LPs. So if you have, we have the distinct benefit, right, of having 4 LPs that are all large strategics. So, 4 Blues, Blue Cross Blue Shield entities, and lining them up, it's 15-minute, 20-minute conversations with the top 6 employees of Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina offers an insight that a small company might never get, right, that exposure. But it takes a lot of energy to curate those meetings and make sure that the matches are occurring, because there's only one CEO of North Carolina, so you have to make sure that you use that time really effectively. Additionally, we do a strategy offsite for our portfolio companies where we match up the strategic priorities for a blue and help our portfolio companies know how to sell into that blue more effectively by what are the key metrics, what are the strategic objectives for that line of business or for that group. And we find good combinations there. I think the thing that helps the blues work most closely with our portfolio companies is when they get into those meetings, they recognize also that they're a partial owner of the business. So they take a certain like magnetism to it, which is really important because they feel that ownership, they feel that like connection, and that makes a big difference for the way that they work together. So there's a feeling of maybe more transparency, a feeling of maybe a bit more, we're working on the same page to drive to common results. And it's been a really successful model for us.
Excellent. Carey, anything else to add on culture?
The only thing I would say is my strategy has been to invest small amounts of money in people over time. So I really very rarely am investing in the product. I care a lot about products. I love them. I care a lot about strategy. But at the end of the day, these businesses are so early on that even if they have great product and great strategy, like their odds of success are still incredibly small. What I'm really doing is building a long-term relationship with a person who I know is going to be successful. And great people are usually successful over the long run. A lot of work that's been done in this space shows that, like the book Originals shows that the best entrepreneurs didn't actually have higher success rates. They just tried more times. And so I really try to build that relationship with the person. If I look at the 5 or 6 CEOs who I've spent the most time with, who are sort of startup founders, it's been smaller investments early and support for them over the course of their career and the ventures that they're going to undertake. And what I'm looking for when I make that decision, finally answering your question, is really 2 things. The first is what I call deep caring. So I've had a long-standing argument with one of my ex-executives. He's retired now from GOJO. He always hired for loyalty. I hire for caring. So caring deeply is something that you cannot teach, and I think it is critical. So
Caring deeply in what?
It's people who care actually care. Like they care in almost every facet of their lives. They're just at stake. They wake up in the morning and when they see a broom on the floor, they pick it up. When when there's no milk in the fridge, they buy the milk. Like they're just people who are at cause for making things better. And when they apply that to their startup, they're getting up every day figuring out all the things that have to happen to make that business successful. When they apply it to their relationships, they're improving those people's lives who they interact with all day because that's just who they are. So I look for that. I look for that deep caring, like just being someone who's in. And then the second thing I look for is work ethic. And they're not actually always, they don't always come together. There's people who care deeply but are lazy. They're sad. They're sad people because they don't get the results they want, right? And it's frustrating. But I really look for the combination of those 2 things, not just in entrepreneurs who I support, but in the people who I really choose to support and mentor and coach and hire in my normal business life too.
Is there a question you ask that gets to work ethic, or is there some sort of like hidden test?
Wow, I think work ethic is a show don't tell. If somebody tells you they're a really hard worker, that's like actually a red flag, probably, right? Like, so
My
I think
biggest weakness is I work too hard.
Yeah, I think that one's a show don't tell, and probably caring is also a show don't tell. Jerry Littman, the reason I talked about the broom, so Jerry Littman, who started GOJO, who was an amazing entrepreneur, he used to leave a broom on the floor in the lobby on days when he had somebody coming in to interview for a job, and if they stepped over or walked past the broom, he would walk them out before the interview started.
Shut up.
Real story.
Love that.
Yeah, but I don't do that.
Abhishek,
But pick up the broom.
What's your broom story?
No, actually, I wanted to really, what you just said is really important because, it's about collaboration I was mentioning earlier. But some of the things about founders, startup founders, right? I mean, they are taking a lot of risk and working very hard. So when we look at them, working with them, we're also looking at when they're successful, can they work in the Lubrizol construct, right? There are a lot of hardworking people. There are a lot of people who are very passionate, very energetic within the Lubrizol confines, right? But their world is small, very well defined, right? If you're changing a product incrementally, that does take a lot of work to accomplish, a lot of work ethic, right? A lot of teamwork. but the structure, they're working under a structure. So we also look at when, as this person is starting to work with Lubrizol to get the market channels, get their product out, will they be able to have the same teamwork, same understanding, same empathy? Because everybody is working hard, right? Everybody is passionate about doing it, but now it's a different structure. Can you adapt to it? So I would say adaptability from a corporate venturing standpoint is very important from a cultural fit.
Adaptability.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, do you have a broom? Like, do you have a broom that you use like that? Like, is there a metaphorical broom?
I do now. So I'd be leaving brooms all over the place in Key Tower. No,
See if Chris picks it up.
yeah. Maybe not there. But I just want to continue on that point because there's adaptability on both sides because I think what we're not saying that startups need to become, basic change to adapt to the strategic they're partnering. It's incumbent upon us as well as strategics to be able to adapt and work with these companies. And so if you are a strategic in the audience, think through all the processes you make these companies come through, and how do you think of it as a product in of itself and take friction out of it, make it a faster on-ramp, create clarity in this moment. So we've spent a lot of time doing that to get good at this because we view it to be core to our strategy.
Can you give us a sense of the breadth of kinds of strategic partners you've worked with? I mean, when I asked the question before, I was surprised about this like dental service organization solution. Like that was not what I was expecting. I was expecting something like Zelle.
Yeah.
So give us a sense of the breadth.
Yeah, the Zells, yes, they're and the clearinghouse, they're partners, but they're, they're large and just not as fun.
They're no longer
as
startups.
Dentist. Yeah, exactly. So we think of the world in terms of vertical solutions. Zentist that I talked about would be an example of it, where it's hyper specific to an industry or sub-industry. Horizontal capabilities. So think of in the context of the CFO's office, AP automation capabilities, where it's a workflow process that's not unique to an industry. And then we have infrastructure partners. These are companies that are coming in, helping us solve a complex problem that may not be client-facing in terms of a capability, but help enabling an experience. So we have partners across all those dimensions, and we're in well into the high teens at this point in terms of those partners.
The number of partners you're actively working with.
Yep.
Abhishek, what's the breadth of partners you're seeking?
Yeah, so I have to give you some background about our investment thesis, right? Where we are investing, and that will give you more understanding of the partners. So where we sit in the specialty, where we sit in the chemical industry's value chain, like I was explaining earlier, we're taking raw materials and converting them to products, right? A lot of customers are demanding like sustainability. So we're talking about biodegradability. You talk about beauty and health products, home care products, right? There's a lot of microplastics. So we work with a lot of companies that are looking at biodegradability, and it's a roadmap, right? So a lot of partners in the biotech space we are working with as a chemical industry to say, and the biggest challenge there is the properties of these molecules, right? You have a very well-structured synthetic molecule, and you're trying to change it to biodegradable, but you also want that property. And a lot of times, it's collinear, right? So we are working with a lot of these companies, completely different domain from ours, and changing the game as far as the chemistry is concerned. The second thing is data, AI. I mean, everybody is talking about it. For us, we are kind of backward as an industry, we are backward because it's not the data analytics. Our data is not in good shape, right? So we approach a lot of companies, a lot of partners where it's more about data engineering, right? How do we get your data in good shape that data scientists can use it and give you the results? Also process technology, right? You see a lot of government grants coming out as, hey, you're using you're using thermal plasma to burn a flare to reduce their emissions, right? So we work with a lot of partners who can help us access to those grants, as well as kind of help us deploy that capital. And then there are some smaller things we work with, but really it's a wide gamut of engineering, biotech, data science. Yeah.
Thank you. And Karim, the health tech space is actually much broader than people tend to think.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Yeah, so our thesis is broad. If you think about it from a perspective of improving a patient outcome or reducing total cost of care or even maybe a patient's experience, it covers a lot of things. It could be the digital infrastructure to help make things more efficient. It could be the pipes to connect data together. It could be the analytics, but it also could be some of the more like sort of straightforward around clinical services. It could just be there's a shortage of surgery centers in a certain community, and that would be an area where you can offer better access, rural access to primary care providers or what have you. When we look across our portfolio, we have about 40 companies. I'd say the areas that we've really sort of balanced out is we'll do early investments in real disruptors because we think that that can have a real impact in our organizations, but at the same time, those might be 5 or 7 years out, so we're ahead of the curve. The other side of our sort of balance sheet investing is around more traditional, right? Where it's a little lower risk, maybe a lower beta, but is solving more tactical problems. Like that, you know, if you think about rural access, like I mentioned earlier, or the cost of specialty meds, or you look at like an Ozempic now, like that is crushing payers today. There needs to be some solutions around for that to help address it and make it more effective and reach more people. But I'd say when we think of an investment thesis, we think of it as, are we solving a problem today or are we solving a problem down the road? And if we're solving it down the road, we want to take that risk and be a disruptor in those spaces.
We've got 5 or 6 minutes left here, and I want to ask you each to offer a little bit of advice to founders and a little bit of advice to investors or potential or others who might be partners to founders. And we'll just start with Carey and work our way down.
Yeah, so given the topic of the panel, I mean, there's a million things, right? But
Right.
given the topic of the panel, I think what I would say is look for opportunities to be less transactional with the people you're seeking help from. I think that being a founder is hard. You're exhausted. You're working 18 hours a day, and it's not enough. You're always afraid you're going to run out of money. Like, there's all these things that are going on that make you focus on yourself to survive, and that's not wrong. But it also isn't putting you in the posture that's going to get you the most long-term help. So figuring out how you can show up differently, even if that's all happening, like put it aside, and show up in conversations in a way that's really curious, that is much more long-sighted than short-sighted, more long-sighted than you even feel, right? And look to build relationships that are more value-added and multi-dimensional than the ones that you're intuitively looking for. And I think you'll be surprised. I think there are more people out there who actually will want to help you, who will enjoy helping you, and who will end up helping you in lots of different ways if you look for that kind of help instead of just looking for the money or the introduction or whatever the immediate term thing is that you need.
And what about for strategic partners, for corporate partners, for big dogs?
So, what I would say is whether or not your company explicitly has a strategy that's going to drive you to interact with entrepreneurs and emerging technologies, I think that every leader who wants to have relevance and longevity should be doing it. Maybe you can do it in your workday. Maybe you have to do it on weekends or at night. But one of the greatest joys in my life is having a couple of entrepreneurs I'm working with who are calling me when I'm running to pick a kid up somewhere on a Saturday, or I'm squeezing in when I'm, on the other side of the TSA line at the airport, just to check in and hear how things are going and strategize a little bit, or, get a call that they got a big customer contract, that we had talked about. Like, it's really rewarding work, and it matters in the world. Like, we're helping these companies that are gonna save lives, make life better, make a change. We're helping them to exist. So I would try, if you don't have any, find one and start and just see where it goes.
Excellent. Karim.
Keeping it brief, it looks like we have 4 minutes. So
We have 4 minutes, yeah.
I think one area that really helps entrepreneurs gain traction with the corporate side or the investment side of a corporation is around being being engaged and a thought leader. So when you think about the outside perspective, it's so easy in a large corporation to be focused internally because everything's going on internally. You get that momentum and you get your cadence. But when you have that opportunity to meet with an entrepreneur on the and bring in that outside perspective, that really resonates, and you can build a lot of trust. And I think once that trust develops, as opposed to just purely transaction, you can gain a lot of, I think, good momentum with it. Eventually, you do have to have that conversation around transaction if that's sort of the business that you're in. But building off of trust is something that really resonates.
Excellent. Abhishek.
Yeah, I actually don't have much to add to all the great comments made by both of you. I would say less transactional. That's really important. Trust is important. And I would say listen how you can solve the other party. This is for both ways, right? A lot of times we come into the conversation, I want this is for me, I deserve this, right? But letting that go, that'll happen. But just see how you fit in their picture and how you make them successful. That will in turn make you successful, right? So that's very simple. For corporate investors, I would say 3 things. Make sure you have the top brass support, right? This is not easy, especially in my industry, not easy at all. So you got the support of a CEO. Number 2, have a very well-defined investment thesis. What you will do and what you will not do. Very crisp. You should be able to explain that in 2 minutes. Number 3, make sure you have financial returns, right? Only strategic will not last 2 organization changes. So make sure you're planning for 3 or 4 organization changes. An activist investor comes and looks at your balance sheet. You said, yep, I'm standing on my own and I'm creating value strategically.
That's really, thank you. That's exceptionally concrete. I really appreciate that. John.
My advice would be to founders, know who you are and stay true to it, especially when you're engaging with strategics or corporates. You'll get in there and you will see lots of opportunity, and it's easy to get distracted. I think the flip side of that, for corporates engaging with startups, don't consume them. It is, they typically can move, startup can move a lot faster, solve problems more efficiently, and it can do you and the startup a disservice if you really start to cannibalize their mission or their strategy. And so just being cognizant of that.
I think one of the big takeaways that I've heard here is has to do really with the fact that these can work out to be, although they may feel sometimes transactional, ultimately these are big wins for both organizations, particularly when there's a cultural fit, and particularly when it's happening with the support of top brass, as Abhishek says, and bring bring potential returns. But this has been a great conversation. Carey, thank you for suggesting it to Jumpstart, and I want to thank all of you for being a part of it. Please join me in thanking our panelists.